Hello and welcome back to the AFL High Performance Podcast. My name is Jack McLean. I'm your host, and today I'm lucky enough to have Kelly Penfold as our guest. We'll be discussing everything that you need to know from a strength and conditioning point of view to constantly get better and have that continuous development. So for the S&C sports scientists that are tuning in, particularly if you're keen to work in pro sport or the private sector, Kelly's worked in both across numerous sports, so we'll be spending a bit of time on her journey, but also some tips to maximize your career and development. So welcome, Kelly. Thanks for jumping on. Really looking forward to our chat.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to just jump on and have a bit of a yarn and share some thoughts with some people. So hopefully I get something of value out for a few people here today.
Oh, 100%. And well done. Right in the thick of pre-season mode. What are we, early February 2025, 8 o'clock at night. So hats off to you for jumping on and appreciate it for your time. No doubt there'll be the listeners in that will be aware of your background, majority of them. But for those that are tuning in that haven't heard of you or aren't aware of, I guess, how you got to this position working in league, do you mind, I guess, providing a bit of background, how it all started, Kelly, your passion for high performance and then different work experiences you've had along the way?
Yeah, for sure. So I have been very fortunate to sort of roll from starting in more of the private space into kind of what I would describe as more of the high performance environment and then into pro sport now the last couple of years. Started right at the start, just doing a prac in strength and conditioning off the back end of my degree, and that happened to be in the private space in Brisbane, in Acceleration Brisbane, and it's all things sort of speed, agility, linking your gym into the speed agility space, and team sport athletes, individual athletes, guys that were off season that played pretty professional, pretty high levels, down to like 6, 7, 8 year olds that they're either a little bit uncoordinated or they might have had just older siblings that were training, so they'd come in and train too. So got a really good spread of that, and that kind of just ignited. Like, I just thought this is so fun to come to work every day and work with this array of humans and get on the gym floor, and coaching the speed and agility bit really spoke to me, coming off the back of always playing a lot of team sports, but also being a track and field athlete as well. So I just felt like it really tied a little bit of my physical background, and all of a sudden these things that I think probably coaches had tried to teach me for years started to make sense, because we were diving deep into it. And yeah, a lot of sort of small me's that I got to coach along the way as well. So went through in the private space for about 5 years and moved from Brisbane to Melbourne, and fortunate enough to get a head coach role down in Melbourne with a couple of guys starting a new private business, and just stretch role, jumped in, started writing more programs than I could even count, learned about business and running the business and invoicing and sales, because it's private, and as you know, in the private space you got to really earn your day's work, trying to make sure people keep on coming in and signing up. And the passion makes it easy because what you're selling is something that you believe in and you're having a great time doing it, but it's just this totally different skill set. It's something that I appreciate that I have now, but definitely then moving to the Queensland Academy of Sport after that, I definitely enjoyed not having to call parents and chase up invoices. So, learned a bit there, but yeah, after a couple of years, I decided that Melbourne was a bit cold for me. I wanted to move back to Brisbane, and just happened to coincide with a nice junior role going on at QAS. So went up to Queensland Academy of Sport and started my high performance journey. Kind of worked my way through the ranks across about 7 years, and same thing, like I just got to work with so many different sports. Having that speed agility background meant that, and conditioning as well as a passion, meant that I got lined up with a lot of field sports. So field hockey and women's rugby sevens, softball. I kind of always had one of the field sports as well as the gym space. So balanced a whole bunch of different individuals there, all working through the ranks of sort of junior development all the way through to Olympians, and heaps and heaps of experience with lots of different support staff and physios and different leadership schemes there. Then after nearly 7 years, I saw a job pop up at the Queensland Firebirds, and I'm a very passionate netball player and always saw myself, after working with a little bit of netball previously, getting back into that. So I jumped in there and was absolutely loving that after 12 months. You know how it is, you start with a squad, it takes you 12 months to really get a handle on what you want to do better, how you can improve, what else the sport has going on. And then, yeah, I just got approached about a job at the St. George Illawarra Dragons at the end of that season. And I love rugby league. I've always wanted to be in that space. Really love the opportunity to work with the boys. Like, the girls are amazing, but you know, getting to jump into a totally different space and work with a full men's team, that came up, and I just, hard as it was, like, couldn't say no. So yeah, been there for about 4 months now, and as you said, deep at the end of preseason. Funny, they're big days, and there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot going on, and you know, you're dealing with a big squad and a big organization, but at the same time, like, just having the poignant focus of one squad, one goal, you know what you're all working towards. It makes it easy to put in big hours and back-to-back days.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It's a great, provides good context, I guess, for everyone tuning in as well, on the different topics that we'll dive into. But before we go into a little bit more about your journey and like mentors and all those different sort of environments that you've worked in, you talked about obviously sales, marketing, and then obviously working in the QAS environment where there's multiple different sports, and then more recently now in pro sport. Like, have there been, like, if you could start your career again, would you expose yourself to those different environments, both business, private sector, as well as institute systems and pro sport? Do you think they have a lot of crossover and they develop you to be a well-rounded coach, or do you feel you would have liked to spend more time in one particular area for longer?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty conscious of the skills that I've picked up across all the different environments. Like, I actually think I also studied undergrad in business management as well as sports science, because I was kind of interested in the idea of running a business and being the head of something in that space. So pretty much getting to go down and run a business alongside the guys down there. I think I really enjoyed that side more than I thought I would, with all of the extra admin and those sorts of skills. And we did a lot of marketing plans and business plans and what have you. And that in itself, because I'm writing programs in my own time, I'm getting that done. And then also organizing my coaching schedule, just the multitasking aspect of having to be on top of your, like, no one's telling you that you have to be necessarily, that you have to have a program written at this time by this day. Like, I just had to make sure that they were all done. Converse back and forward with our director and our other coach, Brett and Tony down there. Huge support for me the whole time. Was tough, like, definitely was tough early, because you know, you're not on the biggest wage for your first full-time role, and they just supported me through that. So even that is a life skill, learning how to move away from the city that you grew up in and manage your wage and still manage to do all the other things that you want to do. I think that actually set me up really well for the likes of the Institute and the skill set of the same thing. Like, no one's necessarily overseeing you in your little performance environment. Like, I had, say, hockey, I had a physio I work with, you know, all the support staff that you work with and the coach, and that's like a separate entity to our strength and conditioning unit. So I had to manage my time and manage the people, and being the one staff member that was sort of full-time in that space and everybody else is sort of contracted, you're having to reach out to them and make contact. And when I was in the private space, it's the same thing. I'd have to reach out to parents, I'd have to reach out to individual physios, be really, really proactive. And I think that served me really, really well into the Institute space. And then equally, you know, going into sort of pro sport in netball, they being the head of strength and conditioning for that, you know, like, strength, power, rehab, return to run, court loads, GPS. and no one is down your throat teaching you. Like I never really had that sort of, I guess, oversight person that I sat underneath and copied everything they did. Never really had that across my career. So yeah, picking up all those individual like self-management skills and all these different areas, I think just one flowed to the next, flowed to the next. And then now the beauty of being in NRL and having a high performance manager is that sort of a role that I eventually probably want to progress through to. So now I do actually get to sit in there and watch somebody do the job that I think I want to get to at some point and learn. And I haven't really had that up until this point. So yeah, I don't think there's anything I'd skip out on. I would have loved to do a bit of extra
Yeah.
time in Melbourne with the boys. Just yeah, got to that point where I thought I'll make the shift now and see what happens.
Yeah, no, well said. I think it's a great lesson for all of us in terms of maximizing the position you're in, because although you might be frustrated and wanting to, you know, if you're in the private sector and you really want to work in sport, you're feeling, you know, maybe wasting time or it's not going to transfer. There's actually a lot of skill sets if you make the most of your time that will.
And being conscious of that too and recording it, you know, like you probably at the time, I wouldn't have realized this at the time so much. Maybe in my interview, I talked about it a little bit and that helped for me for crossover. But I think like for younger practitioners, like as you go through these roles, make a note of those little bits and pieces, your self-management, how you've gone about it. If you're managing another 2 or 3 jobs like I was at certain points, like write that down and reflect on that and collate that so you can talk about it.
Yeah, 100%. No, well said. And on these different environments, obviously, you know, they're at the world-class level, both Olympics and pro sport with professional athletes. What were the biggest influences of your career to date when you reflect on your philosophy, like mentors, if you like? You mentioned how a lot of it's been obviously carving your own way, but who have been some big ones maybe that you worked with or perhaps that you didn't, that are in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think early on, like I mentioned, the guys that supported me down in Melbourne, and yeah, Brett and Tony down there. The great thing about that space was it was a stretch role. So I hadn't been the head of performance. I hadn't written that many programs ever. Um, and they both really shaped me from a personal and professional development perspective. So I guess in a way kind of mentored me through trying to grow the start of my career and grow my identity as an S&C and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And some even like life skills around budgeting and management and where do I want to get to and setting, really intentionally setting some goals to then try to work towards those. And I really credit those guys with, it was the first time I'd ever thought to myself, okay, well, what do I want to do after this? And what does that look like? And, you know, do I want to buy a house at some point or invest or travel a lot? And we worked on that together as a team for one another. So just from I think outside of S&C mentoring and influencing you to think a little bit bigger than just your day-to-day career. And then another really big one for me was when I did move up to QAS, I started in the same office around the same time as Andrew Kroll. And Crowley's been a huge support of mine and mentor pretty much from when I met him. Very similar sort of coaching personality. And it was almost like I was trying to figure out what kind of coach I was going to be and develop that philosophy and figure out, you know, am I stern? Do I have fun? Like I always had a lot of fun with my younger athletes and my development guys because I was trying to make it a great environment. And then how does that cross over to the institute? And Crowley was really instrumental with going, look, this is your personality. If you can't be yourself every single day at your job, you're probably not going to deliver the best program you can. And so starting to really develop the idea of being confident in who I am and the way I want to go about it. And not everybody, as a people pleaser, this tore me down, but not everybody is going to think that that's the best way to run a squad or that, you know, that approach is going to work. But trying to be somebody else isn't going to bring the best out of you as a coach either. So definitely, yeah, shaped a little bit around how I like to sort of back myself and personality and just try to bring as much of that as I can whenever possible. And, you know, he'd sort of been the head of performance at Cowboys and Broncos, and he's actually one that influenced me starting to work in the women's state of origin space. So that was sort of my first little taste of rugby league. Did a little club rugby around that time, not that much, but getting to work with the girls for the first sort of 3 years of state of origin. He really supported me through that, and get that experience, and I'm here now. So there's an array of people too as well at QAS. You know what it's like. You take, for me personally, I'm somebody that takes little bits and pieces from everyone, and just always kind of questioning what I'm doing, if there's not a better way, but like another little approach that I can utilize. So being able to be in the space at QAS where you've got at least 10 other S&Cs to have these conversations with other physios, start to really hone in, what do I want from a program? What's the basis of how I write a program, what I want to get out of the squad and the team? Are we always making sure that we're actually coming back to performance? We talk about the athletes and who they are, and making sure that we've got the athlete and the person, and we're considering that all the time. But you just always have different questions coming at you around, are we taking care of them from a mental health perspective? Are we actually driving performance? Are we driving change? And that has all formulated into kind of my philosophy around really good movement patterns. It's something that I valued from the get-go and have carried the whole way through. And just having a lot of different sort of physios in your space and running rehab programs and getting so many different opinions from different coaches, huge influence. Like I could name 12 people probably in that space. And then just externally, Friends Bosch has sort of been in the background of a lot of my speed and gait and movement analysis and quality of movement and connection. And there's a lot of that. Probably 12 years ago, I think I went to one of his seminars in Melbourne, and we implemented a lot of their work, a lot of his work sort of off the back of that, and we made it fit to our model at Acceleration in Brisbane and then in Melbourne. And I've always kind of come back to different bits and pieces. So it's probably not take the whole lot and run with it, but there's definitely things that, I experienced in that seminar, I put into play straight away, and then I've played around with it and got to know, okay, like even now it's probably been this long. It's probably taken me 10 years to go, oh, now I really appreciate what we're talking about to do with that co-contraction or do with the hip stability, like little things sort of roll into place, just practicing and playing with that work. So yeah, his stuff around sprinting and speeds formulated a lot of my basis of things.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. And what about on the flip side, obviously working in pro sport is we're constantly looking to push the boundaries and develop, like you said, in terms of the athletes we're working with, but also team performance. What have been the biggest challenges that come with that? Comes obviously risk and high pressure at times, and probably every day. What are your biggest challenges that you faced so far, and what did you learn, or how did you grow from that experience?
Yeah, the challenge of understanding that, particularly in Olympic sports, the athletes aren't full-time. And so a lot of them do have uni or full-time job. Like half of our men's hockey squad was working a trade while they were trying to make an Olympic team. And so it's so hard because, you've got them for 2.5 hours of the day, maybe longer, maybe less. And then for another 14 to 16 hours, they're off doing their life and doing everything else. And you don't have absolute control over all the extra things that they're doing. And so trying to learn how to get the best out of them, keep pushing performance and bringing it back to that, but also appreciating that they do have to go for an exam in the morning and they've got to be in there at 7, so they can't come to gym that morning. And then 2 days later, something else might happen. So then they've missed nearly a full week's worth of their gym session. And, a lot of them aren't getting paid again to train. So they're motivating themselves to come in and train 20 hours a week, probably not really they're supported and all their training's, covered and their coach is covered. So they've got the support to allow them to be there. but realistically, like they're training all these hours. So I think that's probably now seeing in pro sport our set of athletes that they're getting paid to be there. They have to be there. They don't miss sessions. I'm not having to find out that they've went and played a touch tournament on the weekend because that's another one of their sports that they currently do while they're setting themselves up for a rugby sevens career, whatever it is. That unknown's not there anymore. And so realizing like that challenge of learning how to motivate your athletes to want to come in and train, but having a good enough sort of relationship or just having enough clarity around what you expect from them to go, if we're going to actually make you better, and the hours of programming that I'm putting into you and all these different considerations that our dietitian's putting in and the coach is putting in for this athlete, like how quickly that can be derailed by 4 or 5 decisions, and having to have those conversations to go, like, I need you to come in, I need you to do at least this, and then we'll actually move the needle, and then we'll actually see improvement. Yeah, I reckon that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then alongside that, kind of what I spoke about earlier, being the contractors, that the physio is only contracted for 6 hours, so you only get so much contact with them. So you really have to be the person that's collating all this information and then disseminating it across the team. And the strength and conditioning coach is sort of the one that sees them like the most hours, even more so than the coach. So yeah, just taking ownership over making sure that you're communicating well and spreading information. And that just so full, like when you're not doing that well, the whole system falls down. Oh yeah, they told me that 2 days ago. Then it's suddenly like, well, why didn't you tell me that? They told me at 6:40 a.m. and we were in the middle of a gym session. I actually just forgot, and putting your foot in it like that because you've just forgotten something, but it would have been really good information for that person to know. You just should have let them know.
Mm. And does that, being in working in that environment, like the hockey players, that where they will miss a session from time to time, does that, I imagine you've got to keep the big rocks the focus, and at times just focus on what the training block might be about and how we can fit that in. Like, did it allow you to condense things and simplify things a bit when you're managing that population?
Yeah, for sure. Again, just getting them, if they've just done 8 hours of a trade and they need to come in and train in the afternoon, just get them there, pick 3 things that are super important and just double down on those things. Something that we discovered, it's probably like a little side step to it, but we're getting really good performance gains. I guess they're overall fit enough, sort of strong enough, but still not necessarily seeing a change in a couple of the boys' performance. And then we sort of take a step back and look at it and go, well, actually their nutrition is really average. So by the time they've come in, they've done the gym session in the morning, they're properly fueled for it. They work a full day. They come in, they start training. We do conditioning at the start. We've just squeezed the last bit out of the lemon, and then they've got to make decisions on the pitch and they're empty. And just something as simple as going, oh, like that's actually maybe something we've missed and we need to do better. How do we give them a bit of extra time to actually eat at the start of training or in training to help them get through that day? I think that's, that's actually we know that's a big rock. Sleep and nutrition is such a big rock. But, you focus so much time on your little strength, power, conditioning. Am I doing all those things well? Just taking a step back and looking at the whole bigger picture. And to your point, going, okay, let's just keep this simple and make sure we prioritize that for a bit so that they're cognitively able to take in their skills and execute them better and react faster.
Yeah, no, well said. That's an interesting insight, and I think there'd be a lot of people listening that semi-pro, either athletes themselves or working in that environment. And I know being in that position, it easily can be like you've got to create that environment where there probably is some fruit, perhaps that the club can provide when they walk in, or smoothie, just a Gatorade anyway they can do, the fuel, or having a drinks break, perhaps
training,
and just setting that to make it a bit easier for those that have worked all day, trained in the morning. How can we help them with the environment? No, well said. Moving into the topic, I guess, as a bit of an intro, why is it something you're passionate about in terms of empowering coaches, for that continuous development mindset, I guess?
I think it's something that I care a lot about just because I probably feel like I wish that I'd asked more questions from coaches and tried to connect a bit more with other coaches that were in the industry early on. I probably felt like I didn't have the right to, or that I didn't want to get under their skin, or you have to prove
Mm,
yourself, so you can possibly ask for help. You just got to figure it out yourself. Or I should have known a whole bunch of information I just didn't know when I started working because I didn't take a prescription subject at uni. And there was something in that prescription subject that everybody seemed to learn except for me, and I learned it about 5 years later. And you're so busy trying to figure it out yourself, and there's so many cups. I always talk about like cups or buckets of S&C. Like we've got our rehab, you've got 10 different injuries that you might experience, from ACLs to shoulder recons, strength, power, VBT, like all these different areas. And you feel like you've just got to constantly upskill yourself. But trying to help guide practitioners on, okay, well, what's the order of that? What's important to you at the moment? How do you actually develop
mm.
a skill set and then move on to the next skill set and the next one? I think that the realization that through doing a bit of my postgrad study and working with a couple of mentors, sort of realizing that, oh, I would have really loved somebody to help me with that when I was 2 years in, because God, how much information could I have absorbed in the last 10 years if I knew that there was a process to it?
Yeah, yeah. No, it reminds me of someone saying that, yeah, you know, your mentors or those that have worked in the industry a long time, they've probably forgotten more things than you know. So
Yep.
tapping into those resources, yeah, it's invaluable. And experience is probably something that is underestimated in our industry because we are so science-based, research-based. But
Yeah.
that instinct from experienced coaches can go a long way for sure.
And you can't cheat
Um,
experience, like you have to have the experiences. You have to fail a few times. You have to, learn. But if you're working alongside an experienced coach that has had a number of those, then they can advise you a lot quicker before you go through the whole process of having to figure that out yourself.
100%. Um, and what do you see, for those starting out, the future generation, perhaps you're helping some of those as well through ASCA and different pieces in the organisation that you're working at currently as well, and different organisations you've worked in the past. But those future S&Cs, the future generations, what do you think are some important skill sets that you think help make an impact in pro sport, that if you were starting again, that you'd spend some energy on?
Yeah, I think we talk about, there's a lot of information around um, that you can get on the internet and you can access through courses or just general reading now, that it can get very overwhelming. So sort of that, well, where do I start? Uh, but
Mm.
trying to just start where you are, and whatever is around you and the demands of what are around you, just worry about that. Um, I think that's if you're working, in a particular sport, just do your best trying to understand that sport. And if you know nothing about an injury that happens in another one, it doesn't matter. You'll get there if you end up working in that space. Or, if you're really trying to extend your skill set around your training processes or your coaching, just getting somebody in to watch you and give you feedback. Like we just don't, I don't think we still do that enough with young coaches. And it's hard because we've all got jobs and we're coaching at the same time. But I don't think that we just have somebody watching us coach and giving us some really just open and fair feedback around how we're going with that. So just really like starting where you are, focusing in on one or two things that are super relevant to you at that point in time, honing that skill set, and then trying to sort of move on to the next. There's a lot around reflecting and getting feedback that I encourage a lot of coaches, and just get really used to. Just, it doesn't matter if the feedback's, you go, you know what, it's not really relevant to me. Appreciate their thoughts, not relevant, that's fine. You don't have to take every single bit of feedback that gets given to you on board, but that way you actually get to see how other coaches think and what they pick up on. And And then, yeah, that starts to give you a bit more of a broader view of the world. And then just finding a good mentor and hang out with them as much as possible if you can. Which, you know, it's not the specifics of S&C. It's not like the nuts and bolts, but it's just those little things. If you can form those habits really early and form your communication patterns, or it's probably not the right word, but understand how you communicate and understand how you coach and maybe why you coach that way, then that goes a really long way to starting to formulate a bit more of your, well, this is how I do it, or your philosophy.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think the feedback, having that reflection piece, so you've got self-awareness yourself on areas that you did really well, or you could do better next time. But I think early days, that feedback, because you only know what you know. So having people around you that have been around hopefully a little bit longer than yourself that can give you feedback on that. And you might be in an environment where you're the only strength and conditioning coach, but it can be an experienced coach that sends probably a lot of other strength and conditioning coaches before you, no doubt. They probably have a good insight into how you conducted yourself in front of the group, how responsive the athletes were to what you were trying to teach or coach or educate if it's a presentation. So I couldn't agree more. I think early days feedback is critical to get better and be the best you could possibly be. What's some of your favorite ways to, I guess, retain that information? Like you said, it is, it's one of the blessings of our industry where it's everywhere, but also it can clutter our thinking and perhaps, affect our ability to actually maximize one area that might be really important for your current role. What are some important reflection pieces that you've done, whether it be journaling or thinking when you're driving to work, that you found effective?
Yeah, I definitely don't think I've nailed it yet. I still will get a question asked of me and I go, I know that I should know about that, but right now I've got nothing. But yeah, the journaling and reflection piece. So something as simple as like, I've just got an Excel spreadsheet, and myself and my coworker, Nathan Spencer, we sit down at the back end of every session and we reflect on our whole session, how we did it, what's our coaching strategies, what did we miss, what do we want to change, what were we happy with being a bit average because we expected that, and just from a coaching perspective, it gets you really clear on how a session went and why it went well. And then from a sort of technical component, having a real connection with the sport you're working in, understanding what's critical and what's important. So when I was at QAS, I had Tim Mosey sit me down when I was just struggling to get this. I wanted to do 10 things in a preseason and I just couldn't decide what I wanted to do. And he sat down and said, well, what's critical, what's important? And so that then from what do I need to research in my sport to do this really well at the moment has really formed a base for me to go, okay, I know in rugby, these components are critical. In men's sports, in speed, these components are critical. And then I think that these things are important. And then that just means that I can just dial just that in for the time being. That's the sport I'm working with. That's what I'm learning about. And then, from an injury perspective, something pops up, just go so hard on that injury and read whatever you can in that space and talk to people about it. So I think when you read it, it's fine. But then when you have conversations with people, that's where we really implement mentally, and our brain changes and our whole way that we receive information actually changes. It's a really interesting piece of neuroscience around how does our brain change when we learn, how long does it change for before that information then gets lost again, and how often do you have to revisit that info to make sure it stays current. So the idea is that you need to hone your focus in on a piece of information for a period of time and then come back to it really consistently on like a 4 to 6 week basis. And if you can do that and just touch base with it after you've gone really deep on it, your brain actually changes enough that it remembers that and retains that. So for me, with my speed, I've never not coached that. My whole way through my career, I've had a sport that requires speed and agility. And so it's like day in, day out, and day in, day out, and day in, day out. And so that's why it's really something for me that's pretty easy to talk about and reflect on. But, shoulder injuries, for example, not something that I've necessarily had to deal a lot of. So when I come back to it each time when there's an issue, I've got to kind of start back at that point of going deep again, getting really on top of it, and then trying to revisit it semi-regularly. So it's probably a long-winded version of saying
That's a great one.
don't try to read 10 things, focus on one, but there is quite a bit of neuroscience around go hard and then tap into it regularly, and don't try to do it with too many topics because we literally can't handle it.
Yeah, that's where it works quite well. If it's really relevant to a current problem that you're trying to solve, you're applying it, and I think you're only going to deepen that understanding when you have to actually action something.
Yeah, you don't have to be
that straight away can
brilliant
help
at all
filter
the
it.
areas.
Yeah, touching on speed, how has your speed philosophy, I guess, evolved over the years? What are some things that perhaps you were doing 5 years ago that you no longer think are as important, and what are some areas that are just essential that really set you up for your athletes to be able to improve their speed, whether it be efficiency or capacity?
Yeah, I think the bit that's stayed consistent for me has been teaching a technical model as a set of skills. And the better that the athletes, or the closer that they can get in drilling as a skill, the more likely it is that then when you're giving them feedback and you're giving them these different exercises to try to change their technique or hone it in, the better they understand where their body sits in time and space in drilling, the more likely it is when you give them one or two cues, they're actually going to be able to action it. I think I've stayed really consistent with that idea that better movers are easier to coach and can therefore change and adapt to the feedback you're giving them to try to get faster off the mark or lower in the change or whatever it is in your piece of speed. Like there's the pure straight line open running, like some athletes are just not going to get that much better at that. But if they're technically a bit more sound and they can think about how they're running, they're probably going to be more cognizant of how they move and less likely to hurt themselves running at high speeds on a regular basis. So I think I've pretty well stuck to that kind of concept of good movement patterns and being quite deliberate in really seeing if my athletes understand what they're doing. So making it a more complex movement, adding different perturbations or stimuluses to see if they can revert back into a nice technique at the drop of a hat, or when they're distracted, can they keep it? And then if I can see that they've learned it, then I know, okay, I can start to give these other kinds of cues because they know where their body is in time and space. I think something that I didn't understand or appreciate, and I've probably changed then for the end result is, we know not everybody sprints the same way. We've got different bodies, different hip angles, femoral lengths, way that we move, and being okay with it not looking a certain way, but being able to identify, okay, that technique still looks a little interesting, but I can see that they've got way better control over their movement or faster ground contact. And then underpinning that, I think now I consider a lot more what's the physical capacity that we're developing, or what's the physical capacity that underpins their ability to perform that kind of drill. So, for example, do they have the trunk component to be able to control themselves to stop them rotating so much or from dropping their hips, and understanding that that's such an important part of, then you can drill them as much as you want, but if they're not somebody that has a quick ground contact naturally, it's not just going to come by getting them to do more and more and more. So you've got to develop the physical capacity to then help you execute that technical piece. And then on the back of that, we might just be able to increase their overall calf capacity and their stiffness just by giving them more reps, I'm actually developing a physical ability to, let's just call it pogo a lot of times, or make a lot of more ground contacts. I don't think I early days really appreciated what's the physical dose and the stress through the tissues that's coming as a result of drilling and speed training. I think, yeah, I kind of appreciate that a lot more now, and I can see it more. And if you can increase the capacity to handle more reps, then probably as they start to get fatigued in the game, they're still able to resort back to a reasonable level of ankle stiffness or a reasonable change of direction position, because you've given them the physical conditioning to handle that.
And with working with the current rugby population, like to be able to handle more of that sort of reactive strength, as well as the conditioning aspect of volume exposure, is that like different surfaces that you're playing around with the heavier athletes? Is it building them up more in the gym with their maybe calf endurance? Like, talk us through different ways to, I guess, when you're looking after a large group, but also a set of athletes that, you know, some are going to be 80 kilos and some could be 120. So you got a bit of a range there. Yeah. How do you navigate that challenge?
Yeah, a range of things. Like a lot of, always done a lot of profiling on their jump ability and their cutting ability, and then their speed that underpins that, and their strength. What's their ability to produce force, and just getting a really good picture of, okay, are they high force or they're not? I think a lot of us probably do that. Trying to then identify, usually your eye, you can tell, like, you know, you can tell by watching them. You don't always need the metrics. The metrics do help you to understand if it's changing at the very least. So you're giving them a stimulus, and are you actually getting a change? In the gym, definitely from a prep perspective, using a lot of sort of unloading and assisted band jump work for faster sort of tendon contraction. Through to, you know, your big, heavy, overcoming isometrics for some of those ones that are at the other end of the scale. So it's probably a combination of what we're doing in the gym, identifying what they need based on what you see and the metrics, and then out on the field, just I mostly adapt a lot of their field component to how they move, as opposed to trying to develop the physical capacities piece. We try to hit it, in our prep, in our gym, in the drilling, and then once we actually get into the speed and tech component or repeatability, it's more looking at the way that they're moving and where do they start to lose shape, and hoping that what we're doing, the work that we're doing, then helps how they're exposing it out on the field.
Yeah, and that's the speed aspect, which is nice to touch on. No doubt listeners are, you know, sort of enjoying that aspect of the high intensity actions. That the flip side of your role with Dragons, you mentioned off air, was looking after the conditioning. With that lens on, are you less technical, less with the technical model? Does that still come into play with, you know, things like when they're doing jogging or more extensive work, or are you more just keeping them on the clock and keeping them accountable on the stimulus you're trying to look with the physiology cap on? Is it more simple, your cues, when it comes to that point, or is it you still trying to make technical gains in their slower movements?
Yeah, it's funny. I see a lot of crossover with a lot of what we do with speed and sprinting and acceleration, in that you can learn to control your body at that faster speed, then it almost becomes a lot easier to control it or be aware of how you're moving at a slower pace. So it's not, you know, not the same thing, but I think that then it helps a lot of crossovers around, like rotating, or I think that's probably the biggest one. Like, you get these boys with these huge shoulders, and so they rotate and they over rotate when they start to get tired and start to get quite like bumpy and oscillate up and down a lot. And so kind of do draw back to a little bit of what we do from a sprinting perspective around controlling their body from a cues kind of point of view. I like to work with athletes on their jogging technique, because we spend so much of our time running so many Ks. I think it's super important still to try to help them with that piece. I have a lot of things up my sleeve that we've used with the triathletes and some other athletes previously that are technical jogging or sort of fast running technique work. You just don't have that much time in a squad of 30 plus in a preseason in a strength power sport where you're just trying to get them fit. So would I like to, and is there more that I feel like we could do? Definitely. And I think it's important because they do so many reps running at that slower pace, and they spend a lot of their time on the field moving that way. It's probably important to dial it in. Most of the time where they're running, I just chirp at them different cues and hope that maybe they're not so tired they can hear me. So I stick to a technical model with that. I do give them really deliberate cues around how they're running. I can see what we could probably work on. Definitely don't dedicate the same amount of time to good jogging or fast running technique compared to our sprinting and speed.
Yeah, and it's a
sometimes it just has to get ugly.
Yeah,
sometimes it does.
Oh, for sure. From a physical point of view, like with your own training, is it something that you feel is important for strength and conditioning coaches? Like bring it back to the topic, I guess, in development. How have you experimented with your own training? Is that more a passion, a hobby, sort of that's separate to your coaching, or when you're fascinated, like 12 years ago with Franz Bosch, for example, were you experimenting with one of those drills on yourself? Talk us through that aspect of your coaching, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's always a strength to train what you're trying to get your athletes to do. I by no means can, squat or bench what the boys can do, but I do it enough myself that I can give them really good feedback, and knowing how it feels, I think definitely helps that. I do a bit of triathlon as my sport. I like swimming, riding, and running. So sometimes I say that I do the sport. Sometimes I might call myself a triathlete if I'm feeling really adventurous. But I guess the thing about that is that you know what it's like to put yourself in the hurt locker with some conditioning, and what genuinely working very, very hard feels like. And I do think that it then helps you to maybe empathize or sympathize either way with your athletes when they are doing some conditioning. Can they actually push a bit more, because you can see that they probably have a bit more there, or actually was this set quite large, and in hindsight maybe you've bitten off a bit more than you can chew for them. I've always gotten in the gym and run through all my athletes programs and tried to make sure that I know how they feel as a preference for me. I like doing that. I like seeing how you pull up and what they're going to be experiencing. And particularly from the sort of accel agility piece, like everything that I had learned through coaching, then trying to put that into sort of my netball programs. And I've been playing netball, and if I'm coaching those athletes, getting in there and being able to do a really good demo for them before they go and execute it. They're such visual learners that I think it's good for them to be able to see what it should look like, and then go in and have a crack at doing it the way that you've just shown them. And I appreciate that everyone's got different skill sets and backgrounds, and so maybe it's not better that they demonstrate it. Maybe it's better they upskill an athlete to then show it. But yeah, for me personally, I think knowing what it feels like to snack yourself with your conditioning, knowing what a big sprint set feels like, and how much you can actually gain by going through your drilling and your movement patterns, like that for me personally has helped immensely with my coaching and getting buy-in and understanding the process of improvement.
I couldn't agree more. I think like you said, from when you are bringing in different training methodologies for the first time, experimenting yourself does give you a better insight for empathy. I think athletes can pick it a mile away as well if you have no idea what you're talking about and you've just seen something that you think might be useful, compared to when you can actually talk to the purpose of that drill, and you can embody it and visualize it. Like I said, they're definitely visual learners, so it is a handy tool to have as a coach for sure. Definitely helps with buy-in. I heard you won the time trial as well. That's
I won
next.
The King of the Hill challenge with the boys
King of the Hill,
twice.
yeah.
So
The boys had a love hearing that, because of obviously Gutho, the ex-captain. They
just got
didn't
him.
take that win. Just got him. Yeah, well done. What was that? A 10K? No.
It's 4.5. It's 4.5 up a hill, Mount Kieran, Wollongong.
Wow.
It's just brutal uphill the whole way. And
did you know you were doing it the day before, or was it spontaneous?
No, the morning of.
Morning of.
Morning of.
Always ready.
Got offered, do you want to do it? I said, no, it's okay. And then I got told, I think you should do it. I think you should race it. So just luckily I'd eaten breakfast that morning and bucked up and put my best foot forward. And quick way to try to earn some respect.
Yeah, 100%. Every bit counts, especially when you're new to an organization as well. So that's awesome. Love that. Great.
I'm glad they couldn't see the pain on my face.
Yeah. Going back to the topic, and last couple of questions as well on this one before we start wrapping up. I know it's getting late, you no doubt have an early one tomorrow morning, but I guess training methods as we start to shift towards in season. What's your philosophy in season as a strength and conditioning coach, working in team sport? What's your philosophy? What's your mindset? And what are your key focuses, I guess, going into this 2025 season?
Yeah, I think, our job is to maximize performance, right? And maximizing that player performance means a lot of different things. I think keeping that in the forefront of your mind at all times is really important. And that could go either way. That could go, okay, you want to push a bit, but probably if you do that this week, that's not actually going to maximize anything for them. It might maximize your strength and conditioning performance, but not their actual, what they've got to put out on the field. And then equally, you might try to pull back too much and you go, well, they're actually doing them a disservice by not getting this stimulus or load into them. And so just having that as the thought process at all times, like, are we maximizing that? Are they so cooked that they should do way less? And speaking up about that, I think, is just super important to be able to bring that up in your team and have the discussion. So that's definitely something that we're looking to do, is just constantly questioning one another around, are we pushing or are we pulling? How does that athlete look? Maximizing their availability. You hear a lot about, at least keeping them on the track means that they can train more, they can play more, so then they should get more hours. And athletes and coaches will talk about consistency. And I'll say, I just need to be consistent. I just need to be more consistent. And for me, it's challenging them back and going, what does that mean? What does that actually look like? So understanding the things that have gotten in their way of doing that previously in previous seasons, and just understanding each individual, like what do starts to crack partway through the season, what let you down last year, and getting them to really understand what high performance behaviors are. I think that for me, there's weeks where we've got longer turnarounds, so we'll do more conditioning. There's weeks where we have a bit more of a capacity to push them, so I'll squeeze a bit of speed in them. I'm really big on, like, where are the opportunities to push them as we go through, because it's such a long season. If you don't, like, as we all know, like, their game fitness, sort of goes up, or they get more used to playing, but their overall capacity and their actual system capacity goes down. And so, we'll be looking to figure out how can we ebb and flow so that we are constantly trying to maximize their ability to perform their game, and not doing a disservice by not giving them enough. But coming back to week in, week out, are we still seeing really good high performance behaviors? Are they organized? Are they helping themselves to recover? Are they doing the right things on their day off? When they come in, are they doing their screening properly? All those bits that are high performance behaviors that suddenly, like, sometimes that stuff can get pushed to the side because they're so focused on what the game was like on the weekend or what the one coming up is, and just focusing on the process in the middle of the week and those good behaviors and patterns to then hopefully lead to that sort of outcome week in, week out. So I think for me, that's something that I'll definitely be doing, and we'll be doing as a team alongside, just looking for opportunities to get in sneaky little extra doses wherever we can to make sure they're in good nick for hopefully finals.
Yeah, no, well said. That's a great way to wrap up the topic. I think we dived into some technical things that you're applying in, you know, different roles that you've had, both for speed and conditioning, and also, you know, a bit of a reflection piece as well for practitioners on how to get better using feedback and noting things down. I think that example with Nathan Spencer that you're currently doing is a really handy one for all of us to undertake. You know, noting things down with Excel spreadsheet, and having that dialogue with someone else as well that's got a different lens perhaps to how you're seeing things. And then, of course, from a development point of view, focusing on what's really important to you and the current role that you're in. Is there any other sort of advice or tips that you want to share before we start to wrap it up on that topic for development for coaches?
Put yourself out there, reach out to people and be proactive. Like, we're all busy. We all forget emails. We all miss messages. Just be willing to chase up 2 or 3 times. I think you do that and people generally want to help you. They get busy. Unfortunately, it's not at the forefront of their mind. So be proactive and chase people up.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. The squeaky wheel definitely gets the grease. You've got to persist.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yep.
Thanks, Kel. And these ones more of a personal note. Pet peeves on the industry, anything that fires you up. Anything can be from the job, the athletes themselves, or as an industry, wider industry that we're in this sort of performance world.
Yeah, I don't often do like much of the social media rant, but I did do a little cheeky repost on the Insta the other day, just about like the whole, context is king, understand what people are trying to do and achieve. And it's nothing worse when you're talking to somebody and they just start giving you advice on something before they've actually asked you, have you done this? What did you do around that space? Like, what does it look like? And they just start talking at you like you didn't know most of the things that they're telling you, and they're probably just trying to help. But I just think a lot of the time, we just start to tell somebody our opinion on something, or you watch a training session and go, oh, that's average. What are they doing that for? That's ridiculous. It's like, well, have you asked the coach where they started with these athletes? What are they trying to get out of it? What do they have in their head where they eventually want to get to? Like, if you haven't asked those questions, just don't comment. Like, you actually just don't know.
100%. We can judge too quickly, for sure. And you've got to understand the context as well if you're just watching one session.
And then you can judge away. If you know the context and you're not happy with it still, go for gold. Till then, settle down.
Yeah. Well said. And what about favorite way to spend a day off?
Anything to do with the beach with the dog, beach with the husband, some shade, a good book, or riding my bike for hours on end.
And then obviously the early part of 2025, what's on the horizon? What are you most excited about for the rest of the year?
Tunnel vision's pretty well on, the boys and how we go and how we're looking. I think that they're looking really sharp. It's been an awesome group for me to start working with, and they're just a really good group of humans, like genuinely work so hard. So I can't wait to just experience my first NRL season and figure out what we can do even better next year. And then a number of events with the ASCA Women's Advisory Committee. I'm really looking forward to. I picked up the chair role of that last year and working with some great people in that space. So I'm excited about, now that I've gotten a bit of a feel for what we're doing, what else can we sort of do and take off in that.
Yeah, fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about that. So what's the advisory role undertake? What's the sort of commitment that you participate in with that role, and what are some things that you'll be working on this year in that space?
I guess the concept is obviously with female coaches, there's not as many of us in the industry for a variety of reasons. And so the idea behind the advisory committee is just to try to work on converting a higher number of early practitioner S&Cs into later practitioner S&Cs, and understanding why why do we look at opportunities and maybe not go for them when we should, and developing and upskilling a number of female coaches with the skill set that they have. Like I sort of mentioned before about, owning your personality, how you coach. It does look different often to a lot of our male counterparts. So working on a bit more professional development with some of the female coaches, getting the names out there more and more, giving them opportunities that previously either haven't been afforded to them, or just, some of us just aren't as interested in going through the rugby league pathway, and that's okay. And there's not really any of us in this space except for me kind of right now. And that's okay, but understanding, is it because there's this perceived barrier, or is it because we're just not as interested? So it's really just a bit of a discovery in that area for the committee, and then trying to support female coaches where we can, but equally trying to put on a lot of events for all of our coaches across the ASCA, men, women, otherwise. Trying to just continue to help facilitate people's PD and offer a different number of perspectives along the way.
Yeah. So I guess that speaks to what you were talking about earlier in terms of reaching out, speaking up, asking for help. But is that similar in terms of applying for jobs, people that are qualified and have the experience, or particularly in this space that you're talking about, female S&Cs that aren't applying for roles? Is that a bit of a trend?
There's a bit of evidence around often like a male coach might only satisfy like 40% of a role description, but they'll put their hand up and have a go. And a lot of females across industries, so it's not just sort of strength and conditioning, but across a number of industries, unless they satisfy like 99% of that criteria, then they don't put their hand up. And there's sort of research and surveys that's gone out around that. So just trying to encourage our female coaches that do sit in that statistic to at least put their hand up and have a go if it's something that they want to do. That's pretty well what we found.
You can build a network from jobs that you don't get. You can build some experience in interviewing and presenting. Like there's so much that could be gained, not just from whether you land the job or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Awesome. Kel, well, for those that have follow-up questions and want to connect, where's the best place?
Yeah, jump on LinkedIn. I try to check that sort of pretty regularly. Sort of jump on there and reach out, and then if we want to catch up, then I'll just reach out in the email and we'll tee up a time, and I'm always down for a chat in case you couldn't tell. So reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll do it.
Fantastic. Yeah, for those tuning in, you might be listening to the recording while driving. We'll add Kelly's LinkedIn in the show notes, so you'll be able to find it there easily and connect with Kel there. Thank you for everyone that's tuned in. If you tuned in live at the end here or halfway through, you'll be able to find the whole recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll release it on our podcast in the next few weeks. And our next live chat is with Matthew Toohey, which will be at 2 p.m. the 8th of February. So coming up very shortly. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks again, Kelly. Really appreciate you jumping on and sharing with us your experiences in high performance sport, private sector, as well as some tips and tricks for coaches to be able to maximize their career. Really appreciate you jumping on.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Boom.